Hello, 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。An investigative program by French television has been forced to delete a recent report they filmed in China after exposing themselves as absolute lying propagandists. The program, which is very well known in France and was broadcast late last month, vividly shows that the two female French journalists who snuck around Chinese factories with hidden cameras are blatant liars. And what's even better, the show also exposes none other than serial anti-China conspiracy theorist Adrian Zenz, providing clear evidence that his research methods and understanding of Chinese are absolutely shocking. You guys are not going to want to miss today's show, which is basically a textbook example of how Western media and Western academics work together to formulate lies about China in order to damage the country and its people. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. At the end of last month, French TV channel France 2 aired an undercover investigation which ultimately accused Chinese factories of child and forced labour. The programme featured two French journalists, Justine and Maureen, who deceptively entered a number of Chinese clothing factories and recorded interactions with staff and their family members on hidden cameras, and ultimately used that footage to make two massive claims: that Chinese factories use child labour and that Chinese factories use forced labour. Now, this episode of Reports on China is going to be a bit more complicated than usual, but I assure you it will be worth it. So grab a cuppa and let's dive right in. If you watched the French TV expose without any understanding of the Chinese language, you might just take it at face value and truly believe the accusations that were made. But lucky for us, the Chinese language parts of the so-called investigation were left intact. So anyone who can understand Chinese could clearly see the deception in the harsh light of day. That, you guys, is why the producers have since removed the show from YouTube, and also why a Beijing law firm is said to be preparing to sue them on behalf of the factories involved. Most of the program, part of the Cash Investigation series, and produced with an NGO called Disclose, which I'll talk about shortly, is dubbed over in the French language, so I won't play the audio here, and instead I'll walk you guys through the video. The first accusation is one of child labour, and it comes after one of the French journalists, who speaks a little Mandarin Chinese, put on a hidden camera and then approached the security guards outside a factory in Shandong province, pretending she needed to use the toilet. Being friendly and hospitable people, the guards agreed and let the woman inside. Once there, she went about trying to gather evidence for her investigation. Now, the factory is one that produces clothing for the popular French brand Decathlon, and they were initially trying to find evidence of forced labour there. But they hit the jackpot when they saw a young girl who turned out to be the 12-year-old daughter of an employee. The French reporter used her limited Mandarin Chinese to chat with the girl, asking if she works there. Now, the girl clearly responded no, that she was just there after school to wait for her mum, since in summertime, which is when the video was filmed, there's no one at home to look after her. Case closed, right? Well, no. The French reporter then coaxed the girl into posing at a sewing machine and pretending to work, which she did without question. This interaction was then branded as child labour. Remember that NGO I told you about who worked with French TV to do this so-called investigation? Well, let's see what they had to say in their propaganda report, which they dramatically titled Decathlon Uses Uyghur Forced Labour in China, and which is still online despite being completely debunked. Now, this really is some amazing creative writing. They wrote, "Her tiny fingers are doing up a Decathlon navy blue polo shirt under the vigilant gaze of her mother, who sits a few metres away at a sewing machine. I'm 12, the girl replies when asked how old she is. She looks particularly small as the huge production lines of the factory where she works illegally are almost empty." Now, it makes you wonder how disgusting of a person someone has to be to fabricate such lies. And I have to tell you guys that this factory was apparently shut down for a time and the workers lost income while an investigation took place, all over blatant Western media lies. The girl's mother even made a crying plea to the French reporters to give her some compensation for the damage they'd caused following their smear campaign. But I sincerely doubt that those French reporters have any problems sleeping at night. The next massive lie came when the two French reporters apparently found a recruitment video on China's version of TikTok from the exact factory they deceived their way into. This is really interesting because this is where German anti-China grifter Adrian Zenz is caught up as well. So basically, the two reporters found a video online with an employee using the social media app to find new employees for the factory. In one video, according to their program, the factory said that people from Xinjiang and North Korea are welcome to work at the factory, which Adrian Zenz then went on to say is absolute evidence of forced labour. Now, I just need to explain to you guys why it might be a problem for workers from Xinjiang to be employed in the factory. And if you don't know this already, then prepare to get angry. Basically, the USA has decided that every single person from Xinjiang who has a job is actually working under pressure from the CPC and is performing forced labour. With absolutely zero evidence, because it isn't true, Washington, D.C. passed a law called the Uyghur Forced Labour Prevention Act, which takes away the internationally held concept of innocent until proven guilty and demands anyone using employees from Xinjiang prove that they are not using forced labour. That means that international companies making clothing and so on in China avoid any factories that hire anyone from Xinjiang, which is, of course, extremely damaging to the livelihoods of the people of that region. And this French report, as I mentioned earlier, is targeting French clothing brand Decathlon, who, in order to be able to sell their clothes internationally, need to appease the US government. So back to the video the two French reporters found online. Here they quote the woman as saying, "We welcome workers from Xinjiang and North Korea here, and that workers from those areas are free to apply for employment at the factory." Try and stay with me because I'm going to tell you guys the truth very shortly. The producers of that French TV show took that video to Adrian Zenz, who watched it with English subtitles and with the woman's voice speaking Mandarin Chinese. He gasps, "Oh yes, she said Xinjiang and North Korea." He then offers his analysis, saying that it is clear evidence that the factory, and by extension Decathlon, use forced labour. But guess what? That is not at all what the woman said. So it turns out that the French TV crew, who clearly have Chinese as bad or worse than Adrian Zenz, didn't understand what was being said and instead subtitled the video into what they wanted to hear. The woman doesn't say Xinjiang, she says Man Qinjiang, which means full attendance bonus. And she didn't say North Korea or Chaoxian in Mandarin. She said Chao Tian Shujiang, which describes bonuses for working extra days. So in other words, the French TV show completely misled their audience with totally and utterly wrong translations just to fit their narrative. But what is so delicious about this is that it shows clearly something we already knew. Adrian Zenz's academic integrity and research standards are absolutely rubbish. And he clearly makes dangerously erroneous conclusions using false data and fake information. The NGO who worked with the French TV show to create this report had this to say. In other words, the factory enjoys financial support from the authorities to bring workers from places where the central governments, Beijing and Pyongyang respectively, and Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea, repress their people. This is incontrovertible evidence of forced labour, says anthropologist Adrian Zenz. Incontrovertible evidence that we just smashed to pieces right here. On top of that, Zenz claims to understand Mandarin Chinese, which we now have clear evidence is also a lie. Adrian Zenz is a complete charlatan. And now to the last huge lie that the French TV team put across, which is in regards to their last big claim, that Decathlon uses cotton picked with slave labour. Basically, because of that US law I mentioned earlier, which says that every single person in Xinjiang is working under forced labour, international companies are not willing to buy and use cotton from Xinjiang because the US, who says all of Xinjiang labour is forced, have decided that Xinjiang cotton must have been picked with forced labour. So the French TV crew are desperate to find evidence that another factory in Shandong province is using Xinjiang cotton. Again, one of the French reporters deceptively enters that factory, this time posing as a potential buyer, wearing hidden cameras. After a brief discussion with an employee, they decide the factory is using Xinjiang cotton. But, shock horror, that is not at all what was said in the conversation. Basically, the French reporter asks the employees if all the cotton there is produced in Shandong. The factory worker replies, not necessarily. Then, and here's the key part, the reporter says, I heard there's lots of cotton in Xinjiang. And the employee replies, yeah, I have heard that. Innocent enough, right? Well, of course, the French TV show again twisted the conversation to fit their narrative, claiming it proved the factory uses Xinjiang cotton. I'm not even joking. After the so-called investigation aired on TV in France, the show's YouTube video was flooded with negative comments in both French and English, accusing the show of spreading lies, and they were then forced to delete the video completely. But as I mentioned earlier, the accompanying report by French NGO Disclose is still online, presenting the report as evidence of child and forced labour in China. Absolutely shocking. And there you have it, you guys, clear evidence of how Western media and academics work together to formulate damaging and false lies about China in order to stop the country's growth and damage the livelihoods of its people. These disgusting human beings aren't satisfied that so many Chinese factories can't even employ Chinese citizens from certain regions or use Chinese products from certain regions because of laws passed in the USA. So they fabricate more lies to try and stop international companies from working here as well. They are absolutely and thoroughly immoral people, and it's time this kind of behaviour ended once and for all. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you surprised by the blatant lying from French media here? And do you think this debacle will affect the credibility of charlatan Adrian Zenz? Let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.